Hello, everyone. Welcome back for the second part of our two-part demonstration. This is Redgate Streamed APEC version, and I'm going to talk about applying practical ways to applying database DevOps into your organization. So, yeah, my name is Anderson Rangel, and I am the solutions engineer for Redgate. So, like I said, this is part two of the live demo. On part one, we addressed the compliance side of things and also the efficiency around provisioning databases in a safe, fast, and efficient manner. And if you haven't seen that part yet, please find go in there. We're going to share that link with you, so make sure that you don't miss that bit. So without any further ado, let's jump into what we're going to see next. So the challenges that we have, and I see that all the time, it starts with source controlling. So people want to go, and DevOps is such a buzzword. Obviously, it's for a reason. It's fantastic, and it does deliver value to our customers as well as our businesses. But how do we start? And my answer is always by effectively, and I have to emphasize the effective side of things, effectively source control our database code. And that is like the first item here in our scenario. So how do we effectively source control our code? How do we minimize failures and optimize deployment? So enough rollbacks. We need to be doing our due diligence before we actually are in a position where we want to deploy to production. So we want to, when we are at that stage, we want to make sure that we have done everything that we could do, and the reliability level and the confidence level, it's to a stage that allows us to move away from 3 a.m. on a Saturday deployment. So we can actually become a little bit more confident, and as time goes by, that will become second nature for us. But around databases, that kind of still tends to cringe people when you see database and automation in the same phrase. So, but I just want to emphasize here as well that we are not saying, it's very, 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 very small number of organizations that actually do continuous deployments. What we're talking about is programmatically define the steps that we need to do to build our code, to validate that code, that CI, and then to deploy those codes in a specific order to the environments, the non-prod environments that I have set, and have the approval gates in place before I actually am ready to deploy to production. Because again, when that time comes, I want to be ready and confident that that deployment will work. So I'll show you how that looks like from a practical perspective. And then later, the last item is, cool, I've made changes to that proc. So is that proc now, is that code now boosting up CPU utilization, or the other way around? So if I done a index maintenance exercise, or maybe I added a new index to my database, wanting to minimize the amount of I don't know, IO throughput or memory consumption, the list goes on how you want to measure the success of your deployment from a resource bottleneck and resource contention perspective. How do you know? So you know by monitoring, which is a agile principle of that quicker feedback loop. So we want to embrace that with a monitoring solution. Maybe not only in production where the use case is obvious, but also in pre-prod environments like a UAT or a test environment. So if we manage to identify those mistakes there and then, it's obviously much faster to fix and much cheaper as well. So let's go to the demo. And for that demo. We'll pick up from where we started. So here I have my shared development model that I said that we can move away from, and we absolutely can. So for my given scenario here, I'm going to say that my manager tapped me on the shoulder and said, look, Anderson, you need to, actually not tap me on the shoulder, it's not the 70s anymore. Like, I just came out of my Scrum meeting and I've identified a few items that I want to work on, and I am going to start working on them. And so I have SQL change automation as part of, okay, I see what I've done here. Let me just pause. Okay, I had a my project pointing to a database that didn't exist, so I quickly created an empty database, which is a great thing to show. So because it's an empty database, what SQL change automation is telling us is, look, there are a few scripts that haven't been applied to that database, and that is everything. So everything that I have in source control. So if I apply to this empty schema everything that I have in source control, all of a sudden I have a database that it's from a schema perspective, it's on the exact same version as production. So I can carry on and start doing some work. This is definitely not what I have planned, but turned out to be a great way to show one of the many things we can do with SQL change automation. And in this example is create empty vessels, but that are on the exact same version of my production database or whatever it is that I have in version control. But that's beyond the point. What I want to do now is actually I need data to make my development. So how do I do that? So I want to go into version control, and I'm gonna create a new branch. So I don't even have to leave the IDE anymore. From within the IDE, I can come over here and I can say, look, it's a new feature, and it's the APAC region branch. So I'm going to create that. So now I have I've branched out my version control. So I am working on a dedicated code base, right? But still, if I'm working on a shared database, that kind of defeats the whole purpose of having a distributed version control system such as Git if I'm still working on centralized development. So what we want is to go back to my project. I'm gonna move away from, so let's imagine that what I had planned is that I would have a shared database here, and I want to incorporate my leverage from my SQL clone capability, and I'm going to say, look, let's use an existing image, and I'm going to create a new database that contains all the data, and it's on the version that I need to be working on. So a pack, what was it? A pack branch? It's probably wrong, but let's go with that. So nevertheless, what I'm doing here is creating a new database. So as we can see in SQL clone, that new database has been created. Now I'm checking for changes. So I'm comparing my new database with what I currently have in source control. And out of that, if I had differences, I would have the capability to synchronize that database with the changes that have not been applied to it. Because my image is as fresh as it gets, there are no differences, and I am ready to start my development work. So what I will do here is let's open up a new query. I am going to, let's say, add a new column to my customer table. I want to add the status column to it. I made a modification. If I jump back into SQL Change Automation and refresh, SQL Change Automation will identify that difference and will have that available for us. So I could commit that change straight away, generate the migrations. I still have a few other things. Best practice would actually dictate that I do that. As I make changes, I commit them straight away. But what I wanted to do now, let's say I want to create a new proc and the APAC proc, just to illustrate a couple things. First, that I am a poor typer. If you have been in a demo with me, you know that to be a fact. So let's explore SQL prompt now, for example, which is this beautiful, people call it IntelliSense. It's IntelliSense on a very high dose of steroids. So it really helps me. It really helps me understand how to write my code a little bit faster. So it tells me what tables I can use as part of the join. It will give me what do I need as part of that joining condition, so it knows which fields to go. I can format my code so it looks a little bit better. I can expand that, or I can actually select which columns I want as part of that code. So here I have it. This is far from being all that I can do. I can validate that it is what I want. Yep, I could export that as an insert. I love this capability. So if I script that as an insert, I'll have that insert statement. But I'm diverging a little bit. Let's create our proc. Could stay hours here talking about SQL prompts. So I made a change, another change to my schema. And I guess the last thing I wanted to show, just to illustrate a really, really neat thing that is coming more and more in our engagements, is can I source control data, lookup data, reference data that my application needs in order to operate? And that is yes. So I'm going to insert that row over here. And it's only the case for tables that I have explicitly selected as the ones that I am monitoring its data. So if I go into my generate migrations, now I should have a longer list of changes. I'm going to generate the migrations for it. And one other thing that I wanted to explore with us is that let's assume, for example, that status column that I've created, let's assume I created that as no. Let's assume that I want to make that not no. So I'm going to challenge myself here, aren't I? So if I'm going to go, there is actually a snippet for it. So it's alter table, alter column. Yeah, it is. So I'm going to say, look, I want to modify the customer table, and I want to alter the status. It's the status column. It's an int, and I want to make that not null. Cool. So I cannot run this because, as you can imagine, there are no values in that. So what I can do, though, is come over here and embed into my script an update statement to my customer table, where I'm going to set the status equals 0, for example. So here I have a runnable code. I'm going to save that and show you that if I come into apply to database, SQL Change Automation will say, look, hey, there is a new code. There are new scripts that you haven't applied to your development environment. What do you want to do about it? I'm going to choose to apply. Let's have a look if that has made the trick. So if I come over here and select from our customer table, if I go and execute that, I should have a status equals 0 and let's just have a look at how my table looks like. It is not no brilliant. That's shifting left to right. That validation is still in development. Great work. Well done, Anderson. Tap on the back. Now I have made this change, and that's not a demonstration on how to write commentary. I'm going to push that change into my remote repo, and oops, and let's have a look at how that actually looks like. So I am using, for this exercise, I am using Azure DevOps, which is one of a plethora of orchestration systems you can use. You can use TeamCity, you can use Bamboo, you can use Jenkins, you can use GitLab, you can use Octopus Deploy for your release management, which I am a big fan of. For this demonstration, I'm using Azure DevOps. So I have a project, my Redgate Streamed project, that when I go into its repo, I should have, if everything went to plan, a new changes to this feature that has just came about. So I'm going to create a new pull request and let that go while I explain kind of what happens there. So what we're seeing here, it's not Redgate per se. So we moved the code to source control, and we kind of paused from a Redgate perspective. We've paused our interactions there. And what we're seeing is, apart from me doing not adhering to best practices again, and I approved my own code, what we're seeing is Azure DevOps in this example operating into creating a pull request capability and then allowing us to review, approve, and merge that code back into master. So if we go into detail to have a look at how that code is laid out in repository, this is entirely managed by the solution. You don't have to create those folders or place your store procedures on a specific location. The solution will handle that for you. It's really unbelievably easy to, again, overcome one of the greatest challenges we have around database development. So my code is now into source control. I can see the scripts that I have created. And if I go into my pipeline now, I will be able to note that that merge back to master automatically triggered a CI step, a build process that I actually don't want to. So the build went successfully. Now I'm running 34 tests that also succeeded, which is great. So there you go. We can actually have a look at those tests. If I wanted to, I could have shifted the test validation further left as well and investigated that into within my own IDE. I could run the same set of tests in SSMS, and if something had failed, I could have fixed it there and then before I even made my commits. Let's say I forgot, I committed my changes. Now during CI, I'm not going to forget, I am going to scrutinize that code through my tests. And once that test is successful and my CI has succeeded, I'm going to move into my release management side of things. And I hope I still have some time. Let's see. Oh, I didn't. So that RSS feed row that I've entered, I actually used that to make sure that the deployment went successful as well, because I have a section in my application on my website that reads from that database. So what we can do actually is point to production there. You won't have that, and then we can make that validation later. So while that's ticking along, let me just show you how I've configured my pipeline. So here we are heavily using Redgate's solution. For my integration environment, I'm purely deploying my build artifact. So I am one of the developers in my team. So as we make changes, we are deploying to integration. So that's nice and well. But from there, if I want to move into QA, and this is my scenario, guys, but it's a common scenario you see being replicated. If I want to, when I'm ready to move to QA, for example, it's not just the one commit that is going, it's a set of commits, it's a large set of commits. So what we want to do for that environment, UAT, apologies, is I want to create a release artifact. And that release artifact is going to compare what I currently have in source control with my targeted environment, and that is going to produce a new subset, a new artifact that I'm then going to choose to deploy. What I'm doing here is I'm provisioning UAT on the fly from production. So I'm going to grab production and I'm going to create my UAT environment. Again, if your environments are huge or too big to embrace this approach without drastically slowing down your process, you can leverage from SQL clone, which is what I'm doing here. And then I can create that database regardless of its size within a few seconds. And then finally, when it comes to production, I'm going to make a manual intervention and I'm going to ask the DBA to actually review the reports that we produce with a visual indication of the changes. Does that manual intervention only happens when you're ready to deploy to production? This is absolutely up to you. You can have those manual gates on before each of the deployments. It's entirely up to you how you want to build that process. So if I go into my release, I have deployed to UAT, which is great. So if I go in here and have a look at my manual interventions tab, that's that report that I've brought our attention to. So I'm just going to open that up and here it is. So I have that new proc that I'm adding. I have that new column that I'm entering, the status column. On the SQL code issues, I love this section of the reports. We're scanning your every line of code and scrutinizing that with over 88, well, not over, with exactly 88 rules. You can disable some and make that look and shape that to your business requirements. But nevertheless, we are running at a number of rules here to make sure that your code is sound. So in our example, 2 of the rules kind of were brought to our attention. One is we have a parameter that has been declared but not used, and I have an update statement that has not been used. If any of the changes would incur in a potential data loss, you would be notified here. And finally, we can have a look at the actual code we are deploying, and we can see where those code flags have an R in the code. So cool. So I have reviewed. Yep, I'm happy with it. I'm the one that wrote. I'm the one that approved and merged back to trunk. So yep, I'm happy to resume that and see it go. And once that happens, we should have a successful deployment to production. I will paraphrase an example that Hamish brought that up. Hamish Watson, one of friends of Redgate. It's his formal tie to Redgate, but I just call him friend. He's a legend. If you don't know him, look him up. He puts a lot of very quality material, and he said that one of his customers actually got the cleaning lady. So because they trusted what they built so much that they actually got a cleaning lady to press the they approve the deploy button, and it just went. Does that mean that it's trivial and we don't care about it? Absolutely not. The amount of effort put in place to produce the pipeline in a way that you're comfortable with, there's a lot of work being done there, but it's work being done on the underlying system that will provide you with the ability to then develop and add value to your customers. So it's absolutely it's an absolutely understatement to say that you should spend a lot of time making sure that that pipeline is to your liking, and you are going to spend some time there, but it's time that it's going to pay itself with dividends in the near future. So we have that success to production. So let's have a look and see if that matches. Yes, it does. My production deployment was successful. We can go into, if we really want to make sure that it did, I can come over here and have a look at my customer table. Let's have a look if those changes are there. I'm pretty confident it is. Yes, it is. And that's that part of the process done, which leaves us with the second part, or the third part actually. So let me bring up the demonstration. We need to start source controlling our database codes. Yes, we do, and we did. We need to minimize failures and optimize deployment through automation. I hope that was clear enough that we can absolutely put a green check on that box. And the fifth item is we need to start monitoring the impact of those deployments. Yes, we do. And the way we're going to do that is with SQL Monitor. So the view that I'm going to show you now, it's pretty uneventful, boring, and well, just dull. It's my local environment, and I'm monitoring my instances. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because SQL Change Automation integrates perfectly with SQL Monitor and allows us to see. We will stamp on your server's timeline exactly when the deployments took place. So let's imagine that one of the changes was a index maintenance, or sorry, I keep saying maintenance, index tuning, and I want to see that IO throughput kind of dropping down, or the changes to that CPU. So I identified that the CPU was spiking to 100%. I made some changes and I want to see that drop. Did it drop? So that's a very clear, in your face type of visual to show you how to do that. And when I click, I don't know if you've noticed, by clicking on the label, that will bring us back to the actual release responsible for that deployment. So then I can go back into, follow the breadcrumbs, go into the build step. I can go into the actual commit, and I can see, look, who did this? Oh, Anderson. Okay, so there was a pull request. Who authorized that? Anderson. What code was it? This is the code. Okay, you added that status column. Yeah, that's all right. And there is this new proc. Yeah, that's cool. And there is also this set of scripts that were executed. So our operations team can now liaise directly to the dev that was responsible for implementing that change and collaborate to rectify that problem, or tap that dev in the shoulder and say, you did a fantastic job. So those are some of the things. Obviously, SQL Monitor can do way more than that very fantastic parts of its capabilities. So we have the ability to monitor our whole SQL state, on-prem, on the cloud, on different clouds. It doesn't matter. PaaS, IaaS, we will be able to provide you with a single pane of glass for you to monitor your environment. If I want to go deeper down in detail, I can. We offer comprehensive alerting capabilities, and we also have the ability to go back in time, adjust the focus of my window, and then start to investigate what are the top queries responsible for that specific area. We have the states capability, which is unbelievable in order to provide you with visibility of your whole state. The list does goes on. I am conscious of time, and I would like to thank you very much for listening to the second part of our two-part demonstration. Again, if you haven't listened to the first one, go in there and have a watch, and I hope this has been informative. I definitely enjoyed, and I hope to hear from you soon. So take care. Bye.